Cool. So today I was going to talk a little bit about, because of the class I have coming up on, manifesting, a, a subject a lot of us like, obviously, it's why we're here. Um, and, you know, and I think one of the problems I know I run into is you have multiple desires. You want to do several different things. And some people seem to be able to do that, but then again, maybe not, right? And it's the old adding too much to the thing, right? And so how do you do this, right? Well, first of all, it starts with clarity of manifestation, the foundation, the clarity of it, right? And, making it the way you want. A lot of us know that, stated in the positive, uh, not because it's easy when you first learn this, and it's still easy to fall into, well, this is what I don't want, right? Just an example of that with myself there. But and then you have to ask yourself, when you're thinking about this thing you're trying to get to, is who do I need to become for that to be just the way the person is, right? If you want to build your business, who do I need to become to be a successful, Albert's working on multiple fronts, but like to be an agent or whatever it is you want to do, right? Or be a good businessman. So who do I need to become to align with these desires, right? Because as my dear friend, the late Neville Goddard would say, it's about the feeling of it, not just picturing it, but the feeling of it. Now, of course, subtext, some people can just visualize it and it brings up the feeling, but some of us have different, it doesn't seem to work. So then you really have to step into the feeling of these desires, right? Let's say you have multiple desires, right? And then you have to revisit that state daily. So then the question becomes, what happens when you have multiple desires that you want to do? Well, if you want to do that, you have to create a unified vision of all of these things together, right? Because if it's just, and I was exposed to, and it makes sense to me, is you want to build this big, huge practice. I said it in the other call, right? Because you go to these conferences, you hear there's a few of us in our field, and it's true, they have, $1 million funnels, if you will, or $1 million coaching programs, right? Well, if you have my frame of mind for a moment, it's like, well, why can't you do that? Well, maybe, you don't have a clear vision of how you can do this and still do what you really want, right? I see it in our field, coaches, therapists, is you say you want to do this, but you also kind of intuitively know, because you listen to their recordings and you see them at conferences, and they'll tell you they're pretty much just running a team, right? And or maybe just running a team to sell basically pre-programmed things, which, trust me, I'm ready to do. But let's say you're still at that point where you really want to help people one-on-one, overcome an addiction, overcome a bad relationship, become a working actor, make better videos, whatever it is, right? You kind of intuitively know you can't do both. But a lot of us have this conflict. When I was talking about the shadow self, it's that the beliefs and attitudes that are underneath the surface. So you have to create a unified vision of how can you build this bigger business and yet keep what you want, right? A lot of us that do hypnosis for weight loss, if you've been doing it a while, I guarantee you run into someone that wants to lose weight, but they can't, and they've tried everything, right? From the prepackaged, they've tried everything. Great thing about weight loss clients, they spend money, they keep trying everything. And now we're even seeing it with the injectables that will get the weight off, but what is the problem? Well, it seems to come right back for a lot of people. Well, what if you could visualize and step into the feeling of being thin and fit and all that, But if you don't have the vision, the unifying vision of, yes, you can do this and still be whatever it is you want. And I've had, I lost track of how many people I had in my office, especially Fort Myers and Port Charlotte, or up north in the Chicago area when I was running the bigger practices. Well, underneath it, they were afraid that if they lost this weight, they wouldn't stay married. They'd get a divorce because maybe they weren't happy, right? Or they couldn't, as one lady said, it sounds brutal, but she goes, I don't know what I would do if like the really cute, handsome, whatever politically correct term we're going to use, UPS driver started flirting with me when I'm at work. They don't now because, whatever it was, right? And so there's that, right? Or, the conflicting thing where you can't get a unified vision would be a lot of us were raised by families that, I cook this just for you. You have to eat this. If you don't love me. Well, how can you easily say it has nothing to do with that? I'm not eating this. I'm not going on a pasta binge, whatever it happens to be, So how can you do that and still be a good, son, daughter, friend, whatever it is? Because a lot of us, again, if you've run clinics, you've seen people, they're starting to lose the weight. They work in an office. And as one lady said to me very clearly, she goes, damn, that pisses me off. I go, what? She goes, well, there's a couple of women working in her office that never bring food in, never. For work there several years, never bring food in. Suddenly she's dropping weight through the hypnosis. And suddenly they start bringing in all this food that she goes, it used to be my trigger foods, brownies, cooking, whatever it was, right? So you have to be able to develop a unified vision where they can all live comfortably together, right? And then you create a mental scene which incorporates all of these together, but in a natural, believable way, right? So, not just picture yourself in your dream home surrounded by loved ones, but everything that goes with it, right? And here's the trick to do this. You have to revisit those feelings of what it will be like when several times a day. You do it in your the morning routine. I did that talk last week. You do your morning routine, then you do your evening routine, but you will get off kilter during the day. Maybe you'll feel doubt, resentment, feeling of lack, whatever it is. So you have to step back into feeling the feeling as if you already have it, right? And how none of these conflict with each other, right? You could be a rich, successful businessman and still be a good husband and father, right? And again, now you have to step back, and I will throw this in there, how a lot of the movies and videos that we watch, the rich businessmen, the successful businessmen are usually not nice guys, I mean, like Superman's arch villain was Lex Luthor, evil multimillionaire. Even Spider-Man, it was the Green Goblin, an evil arms dealing multi-billionaire, right? It makes him bad. Even like Iron Man. Yeah, he wasn't really a superhero. He was sort of a superhero, but it showed he was narcissistic, mean, cruel, all of this other stuff, right? So you have to figure out a way to blend these together, right? So all your desires are fulfilled, right? And then the hard part for a lot of us is letting go of that timetable in your mind. This should happen, that should happen, this should happen, right? Again, to use a scripture quote, even though I don't claim to be an expert in that, it's like, I have ways you know not of, right? About you say your prayer and you can't, as Neville Goddard said, you do not add to or subtract from your desires. Adding to, according to Mr. Goddard, is saying, well, I want this, but this is the only way it can happen. I want to be financially successful and debt-free. And the only way it'll happen is if I build this business this way or do this. That may be true, but it may not, right? There's ways you know not of, right? So that's adding to, just giving basically the orders, right? And then subtracting from saying, I really like this, but I'll settle for this. And it's not that you might not make jumps as you go up, whatever it is, but let's say you're trying, one of your multiple desires is manifesting a Corvette, right? Or in my case, it was a Porsche. And so you're manifesting it, right? But you'll say, I'll settle for this. And I'd be honest, I fell into this because I was practicing this, what it'd feel like to drive it. I went and drove one. I was ready to go. I was picturing it. I was stepping into the feeling. And, I thought certain things would have to happen for me to get it. But then what happened was I stumbled across, bought a used one that had needed a little work, fixed it up. And I also figured out, I'm glad I didn't drop all the money I would have dropped to buy a new one, right? And it got it out of my system, right? So I could step into the end, right? And then the last thing, for these, to manifest multiple desires, again, you have to detach from the how and the when, or add to or subtract from your prayers, if you will, and just step into the feeling from the end like you already have it. And then you want to amplify everything with gratitude. It's called future gratitude. I like that concept, which how you feel when you feel grateful. Someone does something nice for you, you make that sale, Albert, you book those roles, whatever it is, that feeling. So you hang on to that feeling and then put that feeling with the thing that hasn't happened yet. So it's future gratitude. I haven't gotten this thing yet, but I feel like I have because I know what it's like, right? And it's that mindset that you're doing, right? And it's not just visualizing, but living from the end, amplifying all of the things that go with it, right? And then, gratitude, as the 12-step program has talked about, it's in all the spiritual texts throughout history, is gratitude, as we now know, not just changes that in your thing, it, in your mind, it actually rewires your mind, your reticular activating system, to look for more things to be grateful for, right? And then let's say you're trying to get this big goal and you don't quite get there, but you get this. Well, you feel grateful for that, step into that feeling, but knowing there's this, right? And so the actual steps on what I talked about today, and if you want a copy of this, just reach out and I'll send you a copy of it, which is clarify your desires, right? Vivid detail, not, again, don't just get caught up in visualization. I like visualization, but you need to see it, hear it, feel it, smell it, taste it, touch it, and make it real. And then you have to immerse yourself in the emotions of all these desires, right? And then you're creating that unified vision. Especially if you have multiple desires, most of us do. I want to do this, but I want also this, and this, right? So you have to combine and create that unified vision. And we use vision, but it's that unified thing that you want, right? And again, of course, a lot of us have trouble trusting the process, right? Because it's kind of, and then practice gratitude daily for where you are, but then begin to practice gratitude for future events that haven't happened yet, but as if they're happening now, right? And Neville Goddard used to say, and that other, Charles Sinnell, you create basically a time loop. Time isn't, now we know from Einstein that time isn't what we think it is. There's multiple things going on. So what if you create a loop to the different things that you want? So I just wanted to put that out there, have some fun with it. I will open it up if people want to make a couple of comments on record because we're recording. Okay. All right. No, everybody's quiet.
I loved it, of course. I have to say, you've said before, I have ways you know not of, that wonderful quote from text. And I wanted to say today is the day. Like I've heard you say this many times, but today is the day that I'm like, oh, okay. And I think that's why it's so important to listen to things multiple times, like your classes, multiple times, your videos, multiple times, because then you think you understand, like I thought I understood before, but it hit differently today. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's in the Bible in both the Old Testament and I don't claim to be a scholar, and the New Testament.
Oh,
You
so
know,
they really need it.
Bible 1.0, Bible 2.0. It's in there basically the God of Abraham and the God of Jesus basically say the same thing if you're into that. And of course, uh, kind of aligns with other things.
I'd
Okay.
like if I could ask Janice, since we have Janice here, like Dr. Will has recommended, and so has Bruce recommended, um, thinking and really feeling it as you're falling asleep, so that your brain knows this, what you want, what you visualize, what you are feeling as you're in that movie, that scene, and make sure your brain knows, that kind of thing. Janice, do you have any suggestions for that for
Yeah,
the
she
nighttime?
Miss Dream Lady.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you can set a dream intention, of course, which will amplify your manifesting, I guess, potential. And and we actually, you're in obviously an hypnotic state when you are falling asleep, as we all know, and waking up in the morning. And so that's an ideal place to set your dream intention. And like Dr. Will says, you can use all your senses. You can write down your dream intention. You can hold it. You can place it under your pillow. You visualize it, and your dream will then follow suit. And it creates a suggestion in a sense of what you want to dream about. I find with manifesting so curious is that, I think we've all manifested in our lives, right? And when we do, it seems so easy. It's like, winning a scratch off ticket or something. Oh, it's so easy, but it seems so hard in certain ways when you consciously apply it, right? So I remember particularly I was out at a business meeting and I just said to my friend, I said, I feel lucky tonight. Like I felt it. And I won $1,800 in the raffle.
Wow.
So, so,
I feel lucky too.
so it was like so easy. But now when I apply the training, it's not as doesn't seem as easy. That's all I'm saying. So, yes, I do that dream intention. It is helpful.
Then and you brought up an interesting point, and Dr. Will probably know, and you probably know. I'm just trying to get all your knowledge, and Bruce and everyone and Carla. Um, when you said how it's hard to do something that you intentionally desire, the big thing or even the small thing, that does seem harder. So why is that? Like I can manifest small things all the time unknowingly, and I'll be like, oh, I manifested that. Or my friends will say something, I'll go, oh, you manifested that. You manifest, making sure that they are acknowledging their good manifesting ability, like it, because I'm the funny one of the group, like, oh, you're doing it. And so why is it hard? We can do these little ones without thinking, without realizing
Yeah, that's important. I think
without,
because we're congruent, I think it has to do with, because I think about this a lot. I think it has to do with being congruent, that there is no doubt. You see, like when the Bible says, you're not supposed to have any doubt, right? Or
wow.
fear. I just think at the moment we manifest, we have absolutely no doubt. We're not judging it. We're totally congruent, and then it happens.
Like when you said, I feel lucky, there wasn't like, I'm manifesting with all everything. You used it because you said, I feel. So you were unconsciously using your senses. I feel lucky. But and like Dr. Will said, you're not the quote, the spiritual quote of I have ways you know not of. You are open to $10
Exactly.
probably,
I just, yes, I had no how I was going to get it. I had no doubt that I felt lucky. I
Oh,
had no fear. I just was congruent.
and
And
what
also it was deep. I feel like you have to feel all the way down to your belly, like your solar plexus. You have to have that desire that is like, like without any doubt, like I'm saying that, I'm repeating it. I don't want to repeat myself.
well, when
It's
we
part,
repeat, it's for our brain. Go, I'm sorry.
I think part of what both Janet and Michelle are saying, and Janet's saying in a different way by saying congruent. And I'm going to share something that I've picked up because when life gets in the way, and I'm going to use the word life in quotation marks, and life is a 4-letter word, fill in another 4-letter word if you wish. This is a PG program. I'll keep it that way. Life gets in the way. So our manifestations kind of like get a little sidestepped. And what I found personally is that I have to consciously go, you know what? I need to practice, like Dr. Will said, gratitude. I need to realign my brain and go, one of the greatest quotes, not from the Bible, but it's others, is other people's rules of engagement are not mine. So if people are out there trying to make me unhappy or trying to get me into their dogfights, and it's sometimes you have to get into it, but then I have to remove myself and go, okay, I got to practice a little gratitude. I got to practice a little bit in life and reshift my focus because if you got negativity, you're not going to attract positivity.
Hmm.
Cool.
So gratitude is like, and of course, a little plug, I'm building Mazel.com based upon gratitude and science-backed happiness. So
Mhm.
sorry for that shameless plug, Dr. Will.
Oh, no problem. Well,
You
and
manifested it.
to tag on that, like, and I sent it out, right, but I thought of Bruce when I read it, and I'm going to slaughter the quote, but it's Winston Churchill says he never wishes people health and wealth. He never, cheers them health and wealth. He wishes them luck because the Titanic was full of healthy, wealthy people who weren't
Mm.
lucky.
Oh, wow.
So,
Do you?
it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
that just, and we have an expert here with Mr. Albert, in the field he's in besides our NLP coaching stuff. Sometimes right place, right time, right? I know that I hear
Mhm.
these, uh, stories that I think are true where they were lucky and they admit it, right? And so anyway, it's just,
And Janice felt lucky.
yeah, it's luck. Luck.
Yeah, but yeah, it
Well,
was lucky. Yeah, if I wasn't at the dinner, I wouldn't have won.
it's like they make fun of me when I go to 12-step meetings. I'm transparent on that. I always say, I'm Will, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm one of the luckiest men alive. I constantly say that. And I actually got that from a person I know, who was a business guy. I was consulting with him, and he would always say that at the beginning of a meeting, right? Because he came to this country with nothing, you know, after a war, and he was running a multi-million-dollar business. And he'd say, some of it was through no fault of my own. right? I was in the right place, the right time. So anyway, it's just that idea of luck. Sometimes, you know, was it Einstein, whoever said it, you know, you can be lucky or you can be smart. It's better to be lucky, right? And one of my favorite plays is Harvey, and you know, and he kind of has that same line. So anyway, so I'm
Milton
gonna
Hershey
stop the
was
recording
very
now.
Milton Hershey